Every story today starts the same way, just a normal day, a walk to the bus stop, a camping trip, an Uber ride home. And somewhere in the middle of that normal day, something shifted. And the people in these stories were the only ones who noticed. Let's get into it. Trust your dog. A few months ago, I was sitting on my front porch enjoying a peaceful afternoon. I live out in the country. My closest neighbors are over a mile away, just me and my dog, watching squirrels run across the dirt road. About mid-afternoon, a man stopped out by the road and asked to enter my yard. I waved him in. He seemed like a decent enough guy. As he approached the steps, my dog moved to block him. The dog was growling low, and the hair on his back was standing up. This was unusual. The man asked if he would bite. I replied, "He's meaner than hell." He is not mean and has never bitten anyone, but this man did not need to know that. So he stands in the yard and introduces himself as the son of a neighbor down the road. He had moved back home to be with his mom, who is getting up in age. We made pleasant small talk back and forth. My dog stayed between us the entire time. He did not take his eyes off this stranger. He was not growling anymore, but the hair on his back was still standing. That put me on edge as well. I said good day and walked into the house. After watching him drive away, I searched the name he had given me. It did not take long to find out he was a registered sex offender. I felt shivers down my spine. Being that I have a wife and a teenage daughter, I felt it necessary to call his mother. I told her to inform him not to come around my place anymore. I have always heard that a dog can sense bad in a person. I believe it now. Good boy. A dog knew before anyone else did. Now, this next one is short, but the kind of short that stays with you. Because a child told her parents something was wrong, and the adults listened. Parents, if a child tells you someone is off, believe them. It could save your life. When I was around 6 or 7 years old, my brother had a friend from school come over for dinner, along with his mother and her boyfriend. I do not remember much about the boyfriend except that I did not like him. He wanted to play the airplane game with me, where the adult lies on their back with their feet in the air and the child lays on their feet and acts like they are flying. He did it in front of everyone. He never tried to get me alone, but I did not like it. I told my parents I did not like him. And from what I recall, I believe they did not care much for him either. Needless to say, he never came to our house again. Not long after that, my brother's friend's mom went missing. She was later found dead. It turned out he had killed her. I have never fully gotten over it. The fact that even as a young child, something about this man rubbed me the wrong way. Listen to your gut. There is a reason you get that feeling about a person or a place. 6 years old, and she already knew. Now from a family dinner to a shopping center where a woman pretending to be a police officer was walking a 13-year-old girl straight toward the exit. I always wonder what they were planning for me. I was around 13 years old and at the shopping center with my parents. I wanted to go off on my own and wander around by myself for a while, and my parents agreed. After a little while, I was stopped by a woman in casual clothes. She told me she was an undercover police officer and that I was suspected of shoplifting. Because I was young, I was terrified. I did not ask her for identification or anything like that. I did not know I could question authority. She asked to look through my bag, and I let her, insisting I had not stolen anything. She asked me how old I was, who I was there with. Then she asked me something that still sends chills down my spine. "Are your parents expecting you to go home with them tonight?" I told her of course they were. Why wouldn't they be? She then insisted I had to follow her to sort out the shoplifting situation. I went. She was leading me toward the exit. By the grace of something greater than me, before we got there, we bumped into my dad. He asked what was going on, and I told him. As I was explaining the situation, the woman got on her phone, saying things like, "Oh, this isn't the right girl." Then she hung up and said, "Sorry, wrong person," and abruptly walked away. My dad and I stood there dumbfounded. When my mom found out, she was not impressed. She took me to center management the next day to complain about how their undercover officer had handled the situation. The person at management answered, "We don't employ undercover cops in this center." I have no idea what that woman had planned for me, but I am thankful every single day that we ran into my dad. Are your parents expecting you to go home with them tonight? That question. If you have children, please tell them this story, now. From a shopping center to a neighborhood street corner, where a man in a red car asked a 10-year-old a question he had absolutely no business asking. A man was arrested for stalking my family, and his reason for it surprised even the cops. This happened in the winter when I was 10 years old. I was walking to the bus stop by myself, when out of nowhere, a red car drove past me and stopped. I walked by it and a man yelled, "Hey kid." I turned and saw this guy in his early 20s. He motioned for me to come over, but I stood still. He then said, "I saw you coming out of 355 Terrence Road. Was that man your dad?" I had no idea how this person knew where I lived. I got so creeped out that I ran. I glanced back and was surprised to see that he was not following me. That night I was finishing up some homework where I had to track the phases of the moon. I went to my window and was shocked to see that same red car parked across the street. I ran to my parents sobbing and explained everything. I had not said anything earlier out of fear of getting in trouble. My dad called the police and they arrested the man on the spot. My parents went outside to see what was going on, and the stunned cop explained the bizarre story the man had told them. The guy was a rookie private investigator, hired by a wife who suspected her husband was having an affair whenever he visited our city. The husband had given his wife our address and told her he was staying with a friend. When the police showed my parents the picture of the husband, they both laughed. The man did not even remotely look like my dad. The only thing they had in common was dark hair and light skin. The private investigator was sobbing in the police car, and my dad did not press charges because he felt bad for him. And somehow, that ended up being the least scary explanation possible. Now, from a neighborhood to a riverbank at night, where two women nearly walked into something that ended in a stabbing just blocks away. My paranoia possibly saved mine and my roommates' lives. Last night, my roommate and I made a last-minute decision to go night swimming at the river in our city. It was around 8 in the evening, so there were still a few people hanging out in the area, but it was quite dark. About 15 minutes after we got there, I saw a man shining his flashlight, seemingly looking for something near where we had put our stuff. I said to my roommate, semi-loudly, "Hey, keep an eye on that guy." He obviously heard us and quickly moved away. I began to feel anxious, but I waited a little bit before saying anything more. Eventually I did, and we decided to leave. We packed our stuff up and began to walk up the staircase that led to the parking lot, using our flashlights to see the steps. When out of the corner of my eye, I saw a dark shadow dart into some bushes at the top. I stopped, grabbed my roommate's arm, and said, "Nope," and started walking back down the stairs. I told my roommate what I saw when we got to the bottom. She said it was probably just a tree blowing in the wind, but I started getting the strangest feeling in my stomach that I had never felt before, ever. I just knew that if we went up those stairs, something bad was going to happen. I stood at the bottom and began to shine my light toward the top, trying to see if I could make anyone out. And sure enough, I saw the outline of a man for a split second. As soon as the light hit him, he ducked behind the bushes again. I went into full panic mode and started looking for other people who were still there, hoping someone could walk us to our car. Luckily, we found a couple not far from the steps, and they walked us up. When we got to the top, he was nowhere to be seen. A few hours after we got home, I got a notification on my neighborhood safety app that someone had been stabbed only a few streets away from where we had been. I am 100% certain that man's intentions were bad. I do not know if he was planning to kidnap us or rob us, but something really bad would have happened if I had not been paying attention and we had just walked up those stairs. She felt it before she could explain it. That feeling is real. Now, the next story involves a police officer, but not the kind who protects you. This is about a 17-year-old who unknowingly led an armed man directly into her empty house. The police officer who thought he was escorting me home to my empty house at 17 years old. So my friend and I were underage and a little buzzed from party hopping all night. We rolled up to a fast food place at 2 in the morning. I had no idea there was a curfew law for people under 18 in Arizona. I caught a text from a friend asking me to grab her order and meet at an intersection to eat together. I got to the intersection and there was nothing around, just some creepy office buildings and a dirt lot. I stupidly picked the dirt lot to wait for my friend, who called and said, "Is that you with the cops behind you?" And I realized, yes, cops were behind me. Luckily, the car smelled like food and not alcohol, but this officer clearly knew I had been drinking, and I had a large opened bottle hidden under everything in the car. He was not stupid. He asked me and my friend for our parents' phone numbers. My friend's mom got a call and came to pick her up. I, however, did not have voicemail set up, and refused to give my parents' home number. I told him they were probably out and only had a cell number, which I kept putting to silent as he called it. He explained the ticket to me, and I thought I was going to get away with it. Then he said he was going to follow me home. I drove home perfectly. My parents' cars were in the closed garage. Dark house. Yes, it looked like no one was home. The cop parked his car and said, "Hey, you could have bent the rules a little getting home. I wasn't going to pull you over twice." Then he followed me to the front door. I unlocked it and nervously thanked him. But instead of ringing the doorbell or knocking, he followed me inside and locked the door behind us. He was making small talk, looking around my living room, and I started to sense a completely different energy from him. He asked me where my bedroom was. He told me to take him to it. I instead took him to my parents' room and turned on the light. I was 100% thankful to see my sleepy, stunned parents looking back at an armed grown man standing behind their teenage daughter. He let out a slow breath, then said quietly in my ear, "You lied to me, sweetheart." He then switched back to official mode and told my parents about the curfew citation and the fine. My dad asked him why he was in our house. He never really answered. Before he left, the last thing he said to me was, "That's a nice house phone you have right there. Looks new and shiny." I cannot stop thinking about what would have happened if my parents had not been home that night. "You lied to me, sweetheart," said by a man with a badge and a gun in someone's bedroom. Now the next story is one of the quietest in today's video, and somehow one of the most disturbing. Because what happened may be something she has been blocking out since she was 5 years old. I think my grandmother made a profit off of me as a kid. When I was little, my grandmother kept poor company. She still does, and because of that and other things, I am now completely no contact with her. But when I was a kid, my grandmother was my hero. She had a pool in her backyard, would take me to Disney World, bought me gifts, and even got a cat at her house that I took care of. She bought my love through extravagant gifts, and since I was just a small child, I fell for it completely. Now, the actual story is about the company she kept. She herself was a self-proclaimed born-again Christian, which I suppose made it easier to trust the people she brought around. I did not realize it at the time, but she seemed to have a preference for child predators, to the point where she would have them over while I was visiting her for the weekend. I have been told that I was an extremely adorable little girl. Bright blonde ringlet curls, gray eyes. I had even done some children's clothing modeling. Whenever I would visit, there was always someone uncomfortable at her house, and she would always leave me alone with them to run errands. This would take upwards of an hour. Nothing explicitly sexual happened, I do not think. Then again, I could be blocking out memories since this started when I was about 5 years old. What these men would do is bite, nibble, lick, and sniff my feet. I do not know why I did not say something sooner. But eventually I told my mother that I did not like it when Grandma left me alone with the strange men. They would always do that, and I did not like it. It was not long after that I did not see my grandmother for nearly 10 years. I am fairly certain my grandmother was profiting off access to me as a child. And yes, I am in therapy because of what she allowed to happen to me. She was 5 years old. Take a breath. Now from a childhood to a camping trip in the middle of nowhere, where two people woke up to something that may never fully be explained. Something bad happened while I was camping. I am just not sure what. I have held this story in for the last 6 years because it sounds impossible, and I was told not to talk about it. I went camping 6 years ago with a boyfriend of mine at the time. The campsite we picked was beautiful. We were able to drive in through some rough trails. The spot we picked was next to some hiking trails, not far from natural hot springs and a huge waterfall. We were completely in the middle of nowhere. Absolutely no one was around. We set up camp, went hiking, soaked in the hot springs, came back and had dinner. It was all very normal, until we woke up the next day. Before I explain, here's how we slept that night. I put our food cooler and a stereo in the car and locked it. I put the keys in the front pocket of my backpack and placed the backpack next to my sleeping bag on the far side of the tent. My boyfriend slept nearest the door with a gun next to him. We woke up the next morning, and from inside the tent, everything seemed normal. When we got out, our campsite was absolute chaos. The fire pit we had made was ruined. The cooler had been thrown and food was scattered everywhere. The stereo was smashed to pieces next to a tree. All of the car doors were open, including the trunk. We stood there in silence, taking it all in. The woods felt different now. It was quiet in the wrong kind of way. Everything about those woods felt wrong. My boyfriend accused me of not locking the car and suggested an animal had gotten into our stuff. I went into the tent to get the keys from my backpack. They were not there. I found them later on the ground right next to the car. We quickly threw everything in the trunk and left. My boyfriend was completely silent the whole drive. He finally spoke up when we were almost home. He told me that he had had a dream the night before about something kneeling over him inside the tent, holding his gun and just staring at him. When I tried to ask him more questions, he went quiet again and said he didn't want to talk about it, and that I should not talk about it either. Something really wrong happened to us in those woods that night. I just still don't know what. The keys were on the ground, outside the locked car, and his gun had been touched. Now for our final story, the longest, and the one that had the most people saying they had to pause it before it was over. A creepy encounter that opened my eyes. I am 24 years old and female. This is a bit hard for me to write out, but I think it is important. My parents split when I was young. Neither of them had their lives together, which meant I did not have mine together either. From a young age, I was drinking and experimenting with drugs. Just falling into a cycle my family had always been in. My mother had a tendency to bring dangerous people into our home. She was a drug addict and did not consider the risk. I had been arrested a few times before the age of 15. I was a mess. One night, my mom and her occasional boyfriend were waiting up when I stumbled in drunk, and what happened next was the moment I realized I needed to change. Her boyfriend pushed me down and pulled me into another room of the house. My mom started banging on the door, begging him to let me go. To this day, I will never forget the look on his face. It was the face of someone with very bad intentions, a small smile that I swear is burned into my memory. He said something along the lines of, "I'm about to show you why it's bad to let your mom worry about you." I screamed. He kept coming at me, but I fought back. After a couple of minutes of struggling, I scratched him in the face. He became enraged. Thankfully, my mom had already called the police, and he was arrested before anything serious happened. There was a police officer who had always been around when I got into trouble. He was about 60 at the time, always giving me a hard time about my behavior. That night he was there. My mom was taken into custody, along with her boyfriend, and I was sitting waiting while they got my statement. Then he said something I will never forget. "I'm really sorry about all of this. You're not going home tonight." And then he said, "It's time for you to change. Do you want to end up like her, or do you want to be somebody?" I told him I wanted to be somebody. I wanted to break the cycle. I was placed into foster care, which was a horrible experience at first. But it ended up being exactly what I needed. That officer and I stayed friends until he passed away about a year ago. I always went to him when I needed guidance. I am happy to say that I have been a corrections officer for the past 2 years because of him, and I am honored to carry his memory forward through a career in law enforcement. And losing me was what my mother needed to finally turn her life around too. She has been sober for almost 10 years and is remarried to a wonderful man. He asked her, "Do you want to be somebody?" And she said yes. Now for the final story of today, and I want you to pay close attention to every detail, because this one builds slowly and then it hits you all at once. Do not let your Uber driver cancel your ride while you're still in the car. This happened in June of 2018 in Portland, Oregon. I understand I acted recklessly in this situation. Since then, I have become much more cautious. I had gone dancing with friends and was very drunk by midnight. Back then I had very little money and had barely eaten before going out, so it did not take much to get me drunk. I was so intoxicated I barely remember my friend ordering me a rideshare home. My phone was dead, of course. I can vaguely recall them helping me into the car and telling me to get home safe. I do not remember greeting the driver or the first minute or so. But soon after getting in, he asked how my night was and if I smoked. I was just thinking about getting home, so I slurred out that I did sometimes. He offered me a joint. That was the first moment I got nervous and started paying attention. I told him I was really tired and just ready to get home. He said something about it being a relaxing type and being great for sleep. Once again, I said something that was not exactly a yes, but he took it as one. And while I was still barely able to see straight or speak clearly, He said he had to cancel the ride quickly because he could not give me the joint while he was on the clock. By the time I realized how dangerous that was, he had already canceled the ride and pulled over. We were in a completely secluded area. Empty parking lots, a closed auto shop, no one in sight. I was now in a car with a stranger, not a rideshare driver, with no way to call anyone, and he was trying to hand me something that could have had anything in it. For the next while, we were mostly quiet. Every time he handed me the joint, I took fake hits, just letting the smoke sit in my mouth without inhaling. I felt tired, clumsy, and weak. The kind of drunk where you are close to nausea and know you cannot do much to defend yourself. I remember fixating on the fact that I did not even have keys on me. My building used electronic fobs for everything. I looked up to check if he was noticing my panic and made eye contact with him in the rearview mirror. He was staring at me. I could not read his expression. Finally, he said something like, "Well, let's get out here." I told him I would just call another rideshare, and he said, "No, I still have your address. I'll just take you home." For a moment, I was relieved. I wanted so badly to believe him. I tried to calm down. He had not actually done anything threatening. Maybe he was just a regular person, and I was overreacting. He started driving. I lived on the west side of the city in the southwest area. He was driving north on the east side of the river. There were several bridges to our left, and as he kept moving north, he passed exit after exit that could have taken me across the river and home. He kept skipping them. After he passed what I think was the fourth bridge, I had been racking my brain for what to say. I finally said, "Hey, my boyfriend is waiting for me at home." Very meekly. The driver said nothing, but he did take the next bridge exit and made a large turn that started heading me toward home. Even as we were on the right side of the city, heading south, I was shaking with my hand on the door handle, thinking about jumping out at a red light. My phone was completely dead, and he still had several chances to get onto a highway and disappear. We were getting close to my apartment. I was starting to convince myself I was being paranoid. But 2 blocks away, I lied and told him it was easiest to stop there and let me out. He did not say anything, but he slowed the car. I was flooded with relief. I reached for the door. It was locked. I tried to lift the lock manually. It would not move. I looked up at him instinctively, and he had his head turned almost fully toward me, shoulders still facing the road, smiling at me. The worst smile I have ever seen. It was mocking, and it did not reach his eyes at all. I just started crying and asking him to open the door, and thank God he did. Even as I got out of the car, I kept feeling like he would grab the back of my shirt and pull me back in. When I got home, I found out my boyfriend had gone out with friends last minute and was not even there. He would not have known anything was wrong until much later. The next day, I convinced myself I was overreacting, but in my gut, I had truly felt in danger the night before. What stayed with me most was reading later about how a serial killer would do what he called practice runs, picking up strangers to see how far he could push them without them saying anything, testing whether they would trust him. This driver was almost certainly not a serial killer, but I hate wondering whether that night was a practice run. I am at a point in my life now where I realize how much danger I put myself in when I was younger, and I am both surprised and deeply grateful that I am still here. 9 stories about strangers, 1 story about a cop, and every single person in today's video was saved by the same thing, trusting the feeling that something was wrong, even when they could not explain it. Your instincts are not paranoia. They are information. Use them. If these stories affected you, hit the like button. It helps this channel reach more people who need to hear them. And if you want more real stories every week, subscribe and turn on the bell. I will see you in the next one.